Come join me on my second channel, Jaguar Gator 8, where we'll talk all things college football. New video drops every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Click the card in the upper right corner to watch the latest video. And now, on with our feature presentation. A few months ago, I made a video on the awful roster management of the 1986 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If you want to learn more about that, click the card in the upper right corner. In short, the Bucs cut 3 players, and in their attempt to fill their roster by signing 3 players, they failed miserably and didn't have enough men to fill out a full roster, which led to them inevitably losing their game against the Kansas City Chiefs. You would think that something like this would be a one-time thing, right? You would think that a franchise couldn't be bad enough at roster management to have multiple instances of playing shorthanded, where they were completely incompetent at filling the roster, right? Well, think again, because as it turns out, that incident from 1986 was not even the first time that decade that this happened to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where they butchered this so badly that they went into a game without a full roster. Because in 1980, 6 years before this happened, the Buccaneers ran into a similar problem where they were trying to fill out their roster with a wide receiver, and it backfired in spectacular fashion, because they somehow did not have a plan B if said receiver did not sign with them. It was a masterclass of ineptitude, and Exhibit A as to why you don't make things public before they actually happen. And this is the story behind the awful roster management of the 1980 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Before I talk about the actual roster move and how it was butchered, we need some context to understand the player who got cut, as well as the player that they were looking at signing. Our story begins in 1977 with a receiver out of Arizona State by the name of Larry Mucker. He was drafted by the Buccaneers in the 9th round of the 1977 NFL Draft, but over his first 2 seasons, he didn't do a whole lot with the team. Even though he worked his way into the starting lineup for 7 games in 1978, his numbers through the first 2 seasons were a mere 17 receptions for 330 yards and no touchdowns. But in 1979, the Buccaneers shocked the world. After losing their first 26 games, and after being 7-37 through their first 3 seasons, winning a mere 15.9% of the time, they won the NFC Central by going 10-6, and they made it to the postseason for the first time in franchise history. There were many reasons why the Buccaneers did this, including a great defense that allowed just 14.8 points per game, which was the top total in the NFL. However, one of the reasons was the play of Larry Mucker. He didn't catch the ball a lot. He only had 14 receptions for 268 yards on the season. However, he finished second on the team in receiving touchdowns with 5, only behind tight end Jimmy Giles with 7. As a side note, if you want to learn more about the career of Giles, click the card in the upper right corner. And Mucker came up big when it mattered most. He scored the go-ahead touchdown in their Week 4 victory against the Los Angeles Rams, as the Bucs wound up winning that game. He scored the game-winning touchdown in the 4th quarter of their Week 11 victory against the Detroit Lions. When trailing 14-9, he scored a 23-yard touchdown to make it 16-14. In their 31-3 victory in Week 12 against the New York Giants, he had 2 catches, and both of them went for touchdowns. And he was big in the postseason, recording the longest play of the game in the divisional round against the Philadelphia Eagles with a 34-yard catch, and both the longest run of the conference championship from 24 yards and the longest catch of the conference championship from 42 yards. When the Bucs were successful on offense in 1979, oftentimes it came off of the success of Mucker. However, despite the strong 1979 season, he was struggling in 1980. Through the first 6 games of the season, he had just 2 receptions for 37 yards and no touchdowns, and he had 5 games where he was held without a catch. He lost his starting spot, and he was on pretty thin ice, especially since the Bucs were not playing well. After a 2-0 start, they failed to win 4 straight games, losing 3 in a row before tying the Green Bay Packers. With that, we head to the Astrodome down in Houston on October 19th for this Week 7 matchup between the Buccaneers and the Oilers, with this game being absolutely critical. The Bucs were 2.5 games back of the division lead, and a loss by the Bucs would give them 5 straight games without a win and would all but end their chances of winning the division for the 2nd straight year. And during this game, Mucker would make the fatal mistake that would not only end his time in Tampa Bay, but would end his time in the NFL, period. To start the game off, the Buccaneers get the ball, and they're trying to mount a drive. However, on 3rd down, needing just 1 yard to keep the drive alive, Jerry Eckwood gets stuffed on one of the best solo tackles you're ever going to see. Seriously, that is an amazing textbook tackle by Vernon Perry to completely stand up Eckwood and hold any momentum that he had. When Houston gets the ball, they're able to move down the field right away. Ken Stabler completes a pass over the middle of the field to Mike Renfro to get the Oilers into Tampa Bay territory. Then, facing a third down situation, Stabler throws a dart to Ronnie Coleman, who picks up 14 yards and a first down. As a side note, to learn more about the career of Ken Stabler, click the card in the upper right corner. While the Oilers are unable to do anything more and can't punch it into the end zone, they get a chip shot field goal from 21 yards out to take an early 3-0 lead. Now we go to drive number 2. Tampa's mounting a drive. They're not doing anything special or getting any big plays, but they're slowly working their way down the field to the point where even though this is just the third drive of the game, we're already in the second quarter. In Houston territory, they face 3rd and 11, hoping that quarterback Doug Williams can work some magic and pick up the necessary yardage to get the first down and give Tampa a shot at tying the game or potentially taking the lead. What happened next is the play that changed everything. Take a look.
For the Buccaneers on 3rd and 11. And Williams has time, and the flag is down, and it is complete at the 23-yard line. But a penalty flag is down. Larry Mucker making the catch. Wilson bringing him down, but let's check the penalty.
And Houston went with 4 down linemen to rush him. Williams looks pretty good today. Williams is thrown with authority. Looks better than I have seen.
A procedure call against the Buccaneers nullifies the first down game.
That shouldn't happen. When that happens, Gil, you're beating yourself. Well executed play, good protection.
Here's Jim Tunney.
Illegal formation, number 87. Still 3rd down.
That's a lack of concentration when that happens. You see, that play right there is forgotten now. But that play could cost you the ball game.
Sure.
You got a first down. You got Houston in the hole.
I love how George Allen said on color commentary that the play is forgotten. Maybe to everyone else, but not to me. We're still talking about it 42 years later, whether you like it or not. Tampa Bay didn't score any points on that drive, and they wound up losing 20-14. While I'm not going to say that the illegal formation penalty caused them the game, it definitely didn't help that they walked away from the drive empty-handed when they were in clear-cut field goal range if not for a silly mental mistake. And after the game, John McKay talked about the illegal formation, which was not the only one that the Bucs were called for on that day. He said, "We stop ourselves, so we're going to have to do something. We lined up wrong 2 times and were forced out of our game plan. If you're frustrated and the fans are frustrated, look at me. I'm frustrated as hell." He then added, "If it happens a 3rd time, I may shoot myself." John McKay is a press conference legend. Love that man. Anyways, the Bucs felt that after this play, and after a game where Mucker was held without a catch yet again, they had to make a statement and send a message. With that, they cut Larry Mucker, who would never play another snap in the NFL again. That one penalty ended his career. But now, because the Bucs cut a player, they had to fill that roster spot and sign someone. And that's where things get fun. You had a feeling something was coming after McKay just spent the entire press conference bashing his offense for the mental errors, especially when he said, "The offense makes so many idiotic mistakes. We couldn't even line up in legal formations." Mucker was the odd man out, and perhaps rightfully so after the rough season he had been having, and after that silly mental error. But now, the Buccaneers needed another receiver. When the Bucs cut Mucker, they only had 3 receivers on the roster. They had Gordon Jones, who had 19 receptions for 277 yards and 3 touchdowns so far. They had Isaac Higgins, who had 5 catches for 65 yards, and they had Kevin House, who had 1 catch for 11 yards. Obviously, you need to sign a 4th receiver. Going into a game with 3 receivers is horrible, and it's pretty obvious why. If you need to throw late in the game, or on a 3rd down situation, and you need to run a 3-wide set, you're using 100% of your receivers if you only have 3. If one of them gets hurt, that's an entire formation taken out of the playbook. Plus, with a lot of backup receivers playing special teams, good luck stamina-wise having a guy play practically every single snap. Fortunately for Tampa, they had a guy in mind that they wanted to sign who is currently available as a free agent. That was the man you've been watching, and that guy's name is Gerald Carter. The Bucs drafted Carter in the 9th round of the NFL draft that year, and they really liked the guy, especially after a great 1979 season at Texas A&M, where he had 39 receptions for 528 yards and 2 touchdowns, finishing 2nd in the Southwest Conference in receptions and receiving yards, and leading the team in all 3 categories. For some perspective, the next best receiver on Texas A&M that season had 9 catches. Carter had over 300% more than that, so that should tell you about how instrumental he was to the team. And Tampa was super impressed with him early on. His receivers coach, Packers legend and 5-time NFL champion Boyd Dowler, said on Carter during training camp, "He has no problem making mistakes. He is easy to teach. He gets what you tell him the first time. He is a quick study. We got a real good buy where we got him. So far, he has impressed me. He can get behind people, and he has a little size. And quarterback Chuck Fusina echoed the same thoughts, saying on the 9th round pick, Gerald Carter has been particularly impressive. He's tall and rangy, quite fast, and he comes down with the ball if it's anywhere in the area. With Carter, if you get the ball in his area, he'll catch it. However, despite the compliments, it was all for nothing, as he was cut 3 weeks later, failing to make the final roster. But now that there was an opening, the Bucs wanted to bring him back to fill that spot. The only problem? NFL rules at the time mandated that a player who got cut by a team had to go through a procedural waiver process before being brought back. And the Bucs made it laughably and blatantly obvious that they were trying to bring Carter back and that they thought highly of him before he was officially back on the team. So you can imagine what happened next. How the system worked back in 1980 was like this. If a team cut a player, they were allowed to bring him back, but they had to wait 24 hours after until they could officially bring him back, as the player would have to go through waivers. As an example, let's say a player gets cut in training camp by the Falcons, and the Falcons want to bring him back a month later. They have to first see if anyone else wants to take him. If someone else wants to take him, then the Falcons don't have the rights to that player anymore. However, if after 24 hours no team wants him, then the Falcons can bring him back without any problem. And the Bucs made it very obvious that they thought the world of Carter, that he was a gem that the coaches didn't want to cut back in the preseason, and that he was going to be a good player. McKay made it very obvious that he was going to sign him, saying, "We worked him out this morning, and he looks like he's in good shape." Players given a second chance after working in the mill usually are more attentive. And if that wasn't obvious enough, Carter flat out said himself that he was on the team, saying, "I'm just happy to be back on the team. I've been playing City League basketball to stay in shape, and I hope that I can contribute." Remember, the procedural waiver process had not happened yet. Nothing was finalized, and the Bucs were celebrating at mile 25 of the marathon like this was a done deal. Spoiler alert, it was not, because Carter would not wind up on the Buccaneers. The New York Jets wound up claiming Carter. You know when you're in an auction league for fantasy football and someone winds up sniping your player and increasing the bid 1 second before the clock is set to expire? Well, that's what happened here. Because at 3:55 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, October 23rd, 5 minutes before the move was going to go through, the New York Jets swooped in and took Carter. As McKay said on the move, "I'm not mad. I'm an adult. Life goes on." But he was fuming on the inside. But here's the crazy part. The Bucs had no backup plan. And this meant that because they were dead set on one player in particular and decided to foolishly celebrate and hype the man up before the move even became final, they still had just 3 receivers on their team going into their next game against the San Francisco 49ers. And because the team was playing out at Candlestick Park and had to make that flight across the country, guess what that meant? They only had 3 receivers. They had no time to make a move. They completely butchered this move. It was laughably bad and horribly incompetent roster management on the part of John McKay and company. But the funny part is that somehow, McKay still got his guy. Everyone in Tampa Bay was disappointed about the news, and understandably so. Perhaps no one was more upset than receivers coach Boyd Dowler, who said, "It's a case of losing a player we thought had a good future. I thought that when I first saw him. That's the disappointment. They have his contract. It's too bad. We just found out about it, and we have no time to do anything." But in a strange twist of fate, even if it was a bit delayed, Carter would find his way on the Buccaneers. Now, Gerald Carter didn't do anything with the Jets. He played in 3 games, recorded no receptions, and returned 1 kick for 12 yards in a 31-24 loss against the Buffalo Bills. That was it. So in 1981, Carter rejoined the Buccaneers in what had to feel like the longest and most anticipated return of a 9th round pick in NFL history. So was the hype warranted? Was what the coaching staff believed about Carter with regards to his potential true? Amazingly enough, it was. Because Carter wound up playing 7 seasons in Tampa Bay, starting 61 games and recording 239 receptions for 3,443 yards and 17 touchdowns. Carter was one of the best receivers that the Buccaneers ever had, and by the time he last played after the 1987 season, he was 3rd all-time in franchise history in receiving yards, only behind Kevin House and Jimmy Giles, and he was 3rd all-time in receiving touchdowns behind those 2 men as well. He even led the team in 1984 in receiving touchdowns and led it in his final season in 1987. when he had 5 touchdowns in the 12-game season, since the strike took away 1 game and the replacement players took away 3 games. For the Bucs, this was better late than never, as even though it was way later than they would have liked thanks to the Jets swooping in, they eventually got their guy, and he performed incredibly well, especially for a 9th-round pick. Still, it doesn't take away from how bad the Bucs were at roster management that not only was he not playing on the team in 1980 in the first place, but that they had no replacement and had to go out there with just 3 wide receivers. It seems very obvious, but if you're a GM and you're watching this video, always make sure that you have a backup plan. If you are relying so heavily on plan A to succeed and fall into place, when it is far from a guarantee, and your plan B is to just throw your hands up in the air and play short-handed, you need to seriously reevaluate things. Because I'm sure a lot of people felt after this whole catastrophe that when it came to roster management at the receiver position, in 1980, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers really bucked it up. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at Jaguar Gator 9. To see college football videos, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.